You are listening to After Schmoe. Thanks so much for checking us out. My name is Ryan Snelling. Tonight, I have failed to do my taxes. Jaye Williams has to get up early in the morning, so we are just going to squeeze this episode out. It's still going to be good. The quantity just won't be there. So let's just get right into it. Jaye Williams, what's up?
Well, I'm so disoriented right now because I can't remember what we've talked about via text message and what I've actually been, talking about to myself in my head. Might be wise to start breaking the week up a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like a little 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, considering we're not dependent on Harloff and Ellis dropping on a Wednesday night every single week.
That's true. That's something I do want to mention because I think there was some confusion with the commenter last week. Jay and I record this on Thursday nights. Sometimes it's really late. Sometimes it's not. Especially with things like Harloff and Ellis. Sometimes that stuff doesn't come out, unfortunately, by the time that Jay and I are ready to record. So, if you caught last week's episode, Jedi Council was posted, so we didn't understand the whole Denny's thing, and there was no Harloff and Ellis at the time. So our show, unfortunately, becomes dated very quickly, but I try to make sure that you guys know that and are aware of that. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. Yes, that's just part of it because we're also on Eastern Standard Time.
Just deal with it, okay? God.
Yeah, they just have to
relax.
Because right now it's 6:30 where they are, it's 9:30 where we are, so they still technically have plenty of time to put out programming, but it's becoming later and later for us. I was glad that Ellis, I don't know if you caught it on Movie Talk, he shouted us out when Kentucky was mentioned in a news story. So I'm really glad Ellis could inform Kristian where Jay and I actually live. So I was really thankful for that. Thank you so much, Ellis. Let's introduce a new segment. I'm going to call it New News, which is just that's actually slang for testicles. I've called testicles New News for years, but in this particular case, it
sounds like something your grandmother would call them. Cover up your new news.
I think I got it. Where did I get that? Me and my cousin started saying it. It's the vacuum cleaner from the Teletubbies show. It was the vacuum cleaner's name is New News, and I was like, well, that sounds like balls.
I'm not on board with this. Actually, you know what? I kind of am. British people, they have their slang. They call them bollocks, allegedly. So I've been told via popular culture. But yeah, we can have new news.
I have new news.
Cover up your new news. No one wants to see your saggy new news.
I will allow you to say new news if you would like, but I've been saying it for over 10 years, so whatever. It is now the first topic or the first segment of the show. We're just gonna do our weekly roundup, the things that Jay and I noticed this week, all the new stuff at Collider. We're gonna break it down right here. You had someone ask you your opinion on something, so I wanted to go ahead and just pitch it right to you. What did you want to kick us off with?
That's right. That's me, Jaye Williams, J to the A to the Y to the E, the resident expert on all things Collider here. Get your new news ready because it's time to break down the numbers, right? I mean, Schmoedown Rundown, they have their numbers guy. I'm not the guy that you want to do the numbers. I'm just not, right? I can barely spell. I could barely read, but regardless, we're going to try to get through this together.
I have to edit all of Jay's write-ups. Yeah,
that's right. That's why I have you. So last week we talked about the viewer numbers on the videos for Collider. Talked a lot about how, the numbers seem to have been steady across the channel, which is something that's good, something that you want to happen. We're seeing videos do bigger numbers than we've ever seen. They might not be these skyrocketing million play videos that have gone viral, but it is still important that they hit these milestones, so to speak. We did have one person that commented asking if we would discuss the subscriber base and the growth of the channel and whatnot. We just hit the 400,000 subscriber milestone. How long ago was that? Do you remember?
Oh, I have no idea. It was probably around Comic-Con, so summertime maybe.
Yeah, it didn't seem that long ago. I remember, I think it was...
Maybe it was New York Comic-Con. That would have been September or something. So maybe it was then. I don't know.
Yeah, for some reason I remember Dennis. announcing it. I don't know why. Anyways, regardless, we're sitting at approximately 441,955, so about 442,000 subscribers. Approaching 450. If I had to guess, I'm looking at Social Blade right now, which if you don't know what Social Blade is, it's essentially a social media analytics website. Is that right? Is that how you would break down Social Blade? Okay. They are projecting 500,000 subscribers within about 6 months, which, I mean, obviously that's all based on a mean average, but do you think that's a doable thing to get to at least 500,000 in the next 6 months, or at least within the year?
I definitely do. Just kind of, I don't want to throw you off completely, but we talked about it before, them having more of a presence at South by, and WonderCon just recently snuck up on us, and there were people that were there, but they didn't make videos. They didn't make videos at WonderCon. Frosty didn't do anything at South by the way that they usually do for San Diego and New York Comic-Con. So I was a little disappointed by that. Maybe they weren't ready in time, but I think if they were able to do that, that certainly would have helped in some way. But anyway, regardless, within those 6 months, we do have San Diego Comic-Con again. So yeah, I think all of this is very, very doable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at these numbers, and I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole of breaking down numbers and this and that. Let's talk bigger picture, right? We talk a lot, at least in our realm and our world, about the different ceilings that we hit doing the certain specific type of content that we're doing. I mean, with Sight and Sound, you know, if we're doing the same thing for so long and our growth is stagnated, then there's a reason for that. You have to sort of change things up. You have to sort of cast a wider net, which is also a phrase that we've heard one Mark Fernandez use very recently. Back in the town hall, he talked about casting a wider net. And we've seen that. There's sort of, I mean, we haven't seen an actual business plan, but it seems, if I'm taking information that was given from that town hall, it seems like that is the business that Collider will be in moving forward. And so I look at these numbers, and I look at something like Social Blade, and like I said, they're taking this data and they're breaking down these analytics. Like, this website projects, as it stands right now, projects Collider not reaching 1 million subscribers for another 4.5 years. And I think I can see that. I can understand why that is, because there's this level, and Kristian says it all the time, right? There are movie fans out there that Collider hasn't reached, and that's very, very true. But, I mean, they are sort of, at least right now, maxed out, maybe not maxed out, but they're putting out a shit ton of content that's centered around this sort of bubble. I think casting that wider net at this point, changing up the speed, changing up the landscape of Collider is the next level for growth. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, casting a wider net doesn't only include programming, though. I remember
Absolutely.
Fernandez talking about merchandising. That would help slightly. I don't know how big of a push you can actually get from selling merch, but it will definitely help, and the existing fan base will love that for sure.
Just a bump in social media alone.
Right.
I mean, we talked a lot about their social media presence and this and that, but obviously that is going to have a huge impact bringing in somebody like Dorian.
Right, and but also taking it to the streets. You know, it's to quote, "Bring me the horizon." Get off your screens and onto the streets.
Isn't that a protest song?
It is, but I'm using it because things like the IMAX screenings, like just pushing the brand elsewhere. And I guess that does end up being content. Like, Frosty makes a video out of the screening series pretty much every time he does one, but having that brand recognition out on the streets and getting people to come into the theater and see that Collider logo, all of that kind of stuff. They're going to introduce video games, which will be a whole other thing that Collider will be doing. So I don't know. I can't guarantee it, but I could see them getting 1 million subscribers sooner than 4 years based on all of these factors that we're not able to consider yet. The podcast network, another example of that.
Well, I think it's interesting because just from the verbiage that we've heard in some of these discussions so far, both behind the scenes stuff and on screen from the town hall, it all sounds great. Like, it all sounds fantastic, some of the stuff that they're planning on doing. And it's good to know that. It's good to hear that they're not just sort of sitting back. And that's something that you can do when you have that quote unquote safety net like they had with Complex, and now that sort of the rug's been pulled out from under them, or that safety net's been removed, that parachute, so to speak, they have to be a little bit more aggressive with trying out new things. And I think, personally, I think that's exciting. Let's talk for a second about just subscribers and the importance and this and that. I think looking at a subscriber number, it is obviously important, right? We all want that number to grow. We want it to be big and this and that. However, the subscriber number for any YouTube channel is not dependent on the success of a brand or of a business or anything like that. You can go out on YouTube and look at other channels that have a ton of subscribers. You can go to pretty much any YouTube channel and compare their subscriber count to their average views, and there's a significant drop-off. We've talked a lot about that here. I think, for me, the most important thing is consistency of viewership. The number that we talked about last week, seeing a consistent number across all programming, is incredibly important and special, but also engagement of your audience, the sort of connection that you can make, how invested those individuals are. Because if you have a lot of passive viewers, a lot of people who are just watching things just to watch things and they leave, then what value are they really bringing you? It's things like Schmoeville, the movie trivia Schmoedown Facebook group, and this and that. Those types of communities are absolutely invaluable, and those are the type of fans and viewers and whatnot that we want to see grow.
Absolutely. I want to get into some other stuff that we noticed around the channel. Movie Talk was great again this week. A plethora of guests. I love this. It's just a random rotation. I know we see T back, we see Joel back, but I can never guess at a time who's going to be on Movie Talk, and I think that's really,
Do you
really
like that,
great.
though?
Yeah, sure.
Are you sure you like it?
Yeah, because you get a lot of moments. Because I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. I like seeing people interact with each other that I don't normally get to see interact with each other.
Okay. What's your temperature? What's your temperature on the table right now with the amount of people? We talked a little bit about that last week, that I was having sort of an issue with more than 3 people. Where are you at with all of that?
Well, was it today that they got? Well, no, they were still at 4. Were they still at 4? It just depends. I mean, I felt it a little bit today. Today's episode it was Jenna Bush and Joel. I mean, I would definitely agree that 3 is better than 4 when it comes to having everyone having their voice heard. It's obviously going to happen way more with 3 people, but that doesn't mean that certain shows can't welcome 4 different voices. I mean, it's just yes, I would clearly state I would rather have 3 than 4, but it just
Right.
It depends on the news at hand. It just depends on what they're talking about. One day, a panel of 4 could be better than the previous panel of 3. I mean, the only concern that I had, and this is an interesting discussion, I don't know if I have an opinion on it per se, but someone was bringing up the fact they are bringing T on, and T doesn't sound like anyone else that appears on Movie Talk. But someone brought up the point, if you know that you're going to talk about the Marvel and the Star Wars, and you know that she just completely tunes out, it seems like that's this listener or viewer's impression.
I thought you were saying that.
No, that's what the viewer brought up, is that they know that they're going to talk about Marvel and DC on a daily basis, but they keep bringing in a person that tunes out at the mention of a lightsaber. And I could go either way, honestly, with this. But I think ultimately what we've arrived at is something that we've talked about a lot on here, which is the diversity and the fact that you want someone there to burst bubbles a little bit. You want someone there to represent the viewer that doesn't care about that kind of stuff. So I wanted your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, first of all, to speak to that person, I actually picked up on this week while she was on, the fact that even though she is sort of disengaged from her interest level in those things, she is still capable of having those conversations. She brought it up this week. I don't remember specifically what news topic they were discussing, but she still was capable of having a take on it. And that's the type of panelists you want, right? You don't want somebody that says, oh, this isn't my thing, I'm just going to leave. And that's not what she does. You want somebody who is versatile enough. I mean, I look at somebody like Ken when he was appearing on things a lot, even though he didn't go and see a lot of new releases, he could just as easy show up and have his fake takes and this and that. Maybe they weren't fake takes, but he was a personality enough to where he could overcome that. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the bubble that we live in, it's great. It's great to have somebody from the outside. It's great to have somebody and not that she's from the outside. She's just from the outside of the comic book and Star Wars niche, right? We talk a lot of the time about The Watch. We're big fans of The Ringer and this and that. And we talk about how they operate on a completely different landscape, but it entertains us. It makes us better fans, I think, to get those differing opinions, and I welcome it with open arms.
Right. I don't remember anyone complaining when someone like Ken was on, and I'm not saying everyone's complaining about T. I just saw one person bringing up, so I thought it was worth mentioning.
She's a little bit more vocal about it. I mean, she's a little bit more like, yeah, I could care less, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I don't
know exactly when they decide who's going to be at the table. I don't know if they send out an email a day before, maybe at the beginning of the week. The only reason why I bring that up is because if you were flexible enough, you could bring in people that love, I mean, this goes against what I just said, but if T wanted to sit out, like today, for example, we had that Damon Lindelof story where Damon Lindelof is teaming up with Jason Blum, and they're doing that political thriller or whatever, right? T probably would have loved to have talked about that as opposed to something with Star Wars. So I don't know if there's any conversation over there at the studio when it comes to fitting a panelist with the type of show that they know that they're going to do for the day. Because for the most part, the news that they discuss was really broken the night before. They do maybe, if there's breaking news, it's only one at the very top, but everything else is sort of already come out. The viewer's just there to hear their takes on it, as opposed to, is that fair to say? Like, yeah, I would assume that the viewer, someone who cares enough about Collider Video, probably follows or likes all these pages on Facebook. They have the news before movie talk. That's my impression anyway.
Well, I mean, I think to anybody that has a specific issue with an individual who isn't as engaged with your Star Wars and your comic book stuff, this and that, the first thing I would tell you is, well, I've got fantastic news for you, because they have standalone shows where that's all they fucking talk about. So it's okay to not have that coverage on Movie Talk all the time, or maybe as much, or the amount that they're having. I get it. It's obviously the biggest thing in this space, and we can't avoid it. But I'll throw this out there too. I mean, let's open our minds up in terms of what Collider actually does on a weekly basis. Your Movie Talk, your Heroes, your Jedi Council, this and that. Could it potentially be that if she's brought in, or anybody for that matter is brought in, that's not specifically in tune with a more narrow sort of Collider fan? And I don't mean anything negative about that, but I'm just saying that's what their interest level is, something that's a little bit more pinpointed and precise. Could they potentially be bringing them in for other shows that they're developing, and they just need to utilize them on the platforms that they have for the time being? I'm just sort of spitballing right now, but yeah, it's a fascinating conversation, but I think it's a little bit selfish of a fan, I think, to say that. It's like, well, how dare they not talk about the things that, or not be interested in the same things that I'm interested in?
I think it actually came from a good place. They weren't
probably
ragging on
did. They probably did. I'm going to like the dark side of of the commenters.
I think they didn't want. I don't think they wanted to see T wasted on an episode. And again, Collider might not be able to help it. Like, they might already be scheduled, but I think the viewer didn't want her to be wasted. They would appreciate T if she was on an episode where they were discussing. But again, there's so many variables, you can't always control that. But anyway, but you're right. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of cases when they say, hey, why don't you come into the studio? You can record Heroes, but also record your take on Catch Me If You Can, because all of these people are being inserted into the Spielberg top 10. Even Tommy fucking Wiseau was in one of these videos. So I definitely think they take advantage of their pundits when they come into the studio and get as much with them as possible to make it worth their while, because not everybody lives in Burbank. But yeah, do you want to get into the Spielberg top 10 a little bit?
Before I do, I want to throw one thing in there just to throw you off of your entire
here we go
rundown. So actually, it does sort of tie in when we're talking about new content and changing things and this and that. Just to sort of add on to something we discussed last week, bringing back more standalone types of content. Remember us talking about that? Like if they talk about something on Heroes, go back to like that whole Collider crash course sort of style videos.
Yes.
Remember us talking about that?
Yeah.
Had 3DS Maverick reach out to me on Twitter this past week, basically agreeing with us that they should bring something like that back, but he sort of added on to it. He was just saying it wasn't like he wasn't arguing or anything, but he was saying it seemed like the views weren't specifically there for a show like that. And my response to him was basically a plan in terms of how a show like that could actually work. In my opinion, a show like that didn't have long enough to live, didn't have long enough to breathe on the channel to gain the sort of legs that it needed to sort of take off and run and this and that. I think a show like that, as long as it has a consistent schedule, as long as it's cross-promoted, the promotion's implemented into flagship shows, and you reduce production costs, you give a new show everything it possibly can in order to succeed, and it will succeed. But sort of just having that very reactionary thing, like, oh, it's not hitting its mark, let's just cancel it. That's what I don't want to see.
I mean, I think you'd have to have the same mentality as you do with Collider News. Like it purely depends to me what the content actually is. So if you explain Thanos in September of 2015, I don't think that video is going to do as well as when you put it out April of 2018. So if they are timely, depending on the topic, I mean, I don't think you can just make a blanket statement, Collider Crash Course doesn't do very well. Also, I think it can be very useful for film fans. Like I think about some of those things like are actual like documents that they can refer back to. I know Perry brings up the Crash Course all the time that explains how movies are nominated for Oscars. They explain that entire process with the Academy, and she refers back to that video sometimes when speaking. And I think that that's a pretty useful video to, over time, you have these new subscribers that might want to watch something like that, but because it's so far back in the catalog, they might not know it exists. So I agree with you. It's just, I think it's a video by video basis, and you're right, it didn't live long enough. There's only a handful of those videos.
The only argument I could see to sort of looking at it and looking at the numbers and being like, I don't know if this is working, is just specifically by the time and manpower that's spent doing it. I mean, let's remind people that this was also done at a time when Awesome-tacular was going on. Awesome-tacular used up a lot of resources of Collider, for better or for worse, and
also made them a lot of money.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, for better or for worse, and so I'm sure they were looking at things like that. Those shows were very edited. I remember some of those Game of Thrones episodes, or whatever you want to call them, the videos being very edited down in this, and they looked fantastic and they look great. But I think if you're looking at a show like that and saying, I don't know if the numbers justify some of these things, then just pull it back. It's fine just to pull it back and let it be a little bit more smaller until it can grow a better fan base and this and that. I know you want to transition into this Spielberg thing.
Here's what I've noticed. Here's what's happening. We started out, I thought I was going to be able to speed through this show to your benefit, but I don't think you're going to let me at all, and this is going to end up being just a regular episode.
I feel like you're going to enjoy what I'm about to tell you, something that happened. I think people should do what I did this week. For whatever reason, I decided to dig deep in the Collider catalog of episodes and shows. You brought up the whole thing about, it's buried down in the content, this and that. For whatever reason, I looked on the most popular videos list, and I saw an entire episode of Jedi Council immediately after the final trailer. Well, I guess it was the first trailer for the Force Awakens. It was labeled the first trailer, but it was the third trailer that they released. It was the one during Monday Night Football, and it was so fun to watch that video and to see them talk about things that they thought was going to happen in this movie, and just kind of chuckle to yourself, like, there's got to be some content in that alone. Like Kristian sitting down and being like, all right, what did I, you know what I'm saying? Like reacting to himself and his predictions back in the day. I would urge fans, if you're just on the weekend or something, just go back and watch some of those old videos, especially for these big tentpole movies like that where they're predicting things. I had so much fun watching it this week.
Well, actually, now that you brought this up, let's talk about Jedi Council in general, just the Star Wars discussion in general, because I got some stuff on that.
Fuck off, Steven Spielberg.
I wish that I would agree with that when it comes to his attitude towards Netflix. But anyway.
What have you done?
Right, exactly. So
made a movie about a turd with eyes? I'm sorry, go ahead.
So when it comes to, I would love to watch that because I miss the positive, happy-go-lucky attitude that the gang had towards Star Wars before The Last Jedi, because Kristian, and this is purely me discussing our opinions of the film, so there's nothing I can really change about it, but as someone who enjoys The Last Jedi quite a bit, I'm just wearing down hearing people talk badly about it, and I'm not saying Kristian is like the toxic online terrorists that are going nuts. You should have seen The Last Jedi Honest trailer. Like, the people that were reacting to that, God, it was a cesspool. We need a new plague. I'm not lumping Kristian into that, but because I'm just so worn out on the negativity towards The Last Jedi, just because I don't see it, it's funny. Like, I had to stop The Last Jedi commentary like 30 minutes in. It wasn't just Kristian. I don't know. I couldn't take it, but that's not really a content criticism. That's just something that I experienced this week. So, to your point, I would probably love to go back and watch pre-Last Jedi Council.
It is a lot of fun. I get what you're saying. It's interesting right now, right? Because, Star Wars was supposed to be this thing, and it is, and it's been this thing that's brought this whole community together, and it's really elevated. I mean, a lot of YouTube channels out there, a lot of these movie pundits have built their careers on the back of Star Wars, and it's been propelled. So it is interesting that we are in this time of, I don't know, where things are so polarizing. I think it makes things more interesting. But I definitely get what you're saying, where it can be exhausting, especially because there's this whole new wave of it, right? There's this whole new wave of conversation centered around it now that they're promoting the DVD and the Blu-ray, not the DVD, the Blu-ray and the digital download and this and that. Real quick, I guess since we're going to talk about Jedi Council, I didn't get a chance to watch. I know you did. I got a little bit of news from our buddy Luke Jaggers that they announced that they are moving to a standalone podcast feed.
Yeah, we'll get to that when we talk about the podcast feed, because there's other news towards that. That's why you need to let me host the show, Jay. Jesus.
I don't believe in that. Welcome to After Jay. It's a show about me now.
Anyways, I'm glad that they opened up the show. They were talking about Mark Hamill, because Mark Hamill is still flapping his gums about how disappointed he is with the treatment of Luke Skywalker. Let me tell you this, Mark Hamill. You were lucky to be involved with the trilogy at all. And someone who has had your career on screen, some actors would kill to have the arc that you had in The Last Jedi. Did you go pee in the third act? You did.
I've already had enough of this. Please stop.
They talked about that a little bit, and they continued to talk about the divide. I mentioned how they put out the Last Jedi commentary this week. They had a guest. I wanted to know, they had a musician guest on today. His name is Van Williams. Do you have
Here we go. Collider Jukebox. At it again.
Do you know who Van Williams is?
No.
Okay, well, he's a musician. He's from Alaska. Look out for the Van William album review on Sight and Sound next week.
Did
he
they
was
just
on the show.
find him on the street, or how did he get on Jedi Council?
Well, he's a big fan of Collider, apparently. I don't know if he knew anybody personally. I don't know if he knew Mark Fernandez. Maybe he just reached out. It kind of felt like a Cody Miller situation where they just found out, hey, this Olympic swimmer watches Collider. Let's just bring him on the show, whether he's qualified or not. Turns out they do pretty well for themselves because they usually do pretty well on the show. So
I'm furious right now. I guess maybe I shouldn't be furious.
I'm furious right now too. Did you just get the notification I got?
No, I didn't. Anyways,
Harloff and Ellis is up right now.
Okay, well,
it's 10 p.m. where we are.
So here's why I'm not really furious because I think I'm about to mention something that I don't even know if Kristian knew about. I've known for a very long time that there's a relatively famous person that watches Collider that you and I connected with on Twitter, and we were like, man, this would be a great get. But instead, no offense to Van Williams is it Van William?
It's Van William. There is a Van Williams, but
so
this is
Van William, 114,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. That's great. I'm happy for you. But come on, man, this I'm telling you, it would have been the shit. It would have been the new news.
Well, what we would have run into if we, threw it out to whoever at Collider, hey, this person watches, they would have said who? I don't know if they would have understood how big they were, and we would have just thrown our face into our hands in pure outrage.
But instead you got the Alaskan musician talking about porgs. How dare they?
He did a pretty good job, though.
I'm sure he did. I haven't even watched him being a dong right now.
Yeah, no, it's okay. No, he did a good job, and he fit right in, and they had a good, healthy Star Wars discussion, and it was all good.
We'll probably see him on the Schmoedown next.
Yeah.
Hey, man, you want to compete against...
He's going to pop up in tomorrow's Spielberg video.
Oh, great. My dog just came in the room.
So that's Shinfo. So how this relates to the podcast feed, yes, you're right. It was announced that next week they think that they're going to have the Jedi Council podcast feed up on Monday. So next week's show will be there. So make sure that if you are a subscriber of the Collider Audio Edition podcast feed where you get all these great shows, make sure that you are on the lookout. I'm sure Kristian and all those guys will tweet it out. Make sure you are on the lookout for a brand new podcast feed, and there are definitely more to come, including, this is the other announcement I wanted your take on, one-on-one with Kristian Harloff. It is an interview show. I assume it's going to be essentially what we saw with him and Stephen DeKnight. That is going to be a thing on the Collider podcast feed. What's your reaction to one-on-one with Kristian Harloff?
I think it's cool. It sounds like the Harloff podcast, which is cool. I think that's fine.
But celebrities.
Yeah.
But people of interest outside of
Well, I mean,
Collider.
they had Finstock. He had Finstock on there. I mean... I don't know. Maybe he'll use the thumbnail that I made for him back in the day. I don't know. No, I think it's cool, man. I mean, listen, it's new content, but it is confirmed that it's on the podcast feed?
Yeah. Well,
Which
podcast
podcast
network,
feed?
not feed. It's probably going to be a new feed.
Okay. So we don't know exactly where it's going to live.
It'll be on the podcast feed. You want to know who his first guest is?
I think I saw a picture.
It was the third lead in Fantastic Beasts.
Okay. Cool. Sounds good. No, I think I'm excited. No, I'm really excited that he's got the show. I know Kristian listens to this. The thing that I hope
He doesn't.
The thing that I hope that it stays consistent. I mean, he doesn't need me to tell him that, but that's the only thing that I worry about is maybe because I'm assuming that it's going to be under the Collider banner. I hope that it is a consistent show. Maybe it'll be like, I don't know, something that we've talked about in the past where it's like it's not going to be a consistent show. It's just going to be every now and then. But I'm not on board with that. Like I want them to make content that is just rapid fire here and there and everywhere. But I also want like a new weekly show from Collider, whether it's a podcast or it's on YouTube. And that's just me talking. But, and I think he probably knows where I'm coming from with that. Like I miss the Kristian Harloff show, the podcast. I miss Carpool. I miss all this stuff, man. I just want you to do the right thing.
You did, I dismissed it, but now that I'm asking the question, I want to talk about it. You asked where this was going to live, so I'd be curious if they start a Collider podcast network YouTube channel in the same vein as SK Plus, where all this lives, or will One-on-One with Kristian Harloff live on Collider Video's YouTube channel with the third lead from Fantastic Beasts? I don't know.
I mean, I guess it could live somewhere on the Schmoe Snow feed too, but I mean, I'm assuming that it's going to be for Collider. But yeah, who asked me about this when they announced it? Oh, it was Luke when he asked about the Jedi Council thing, and I just told him, I said, well, it seems like they're making room for the podcast feed. If they're going to utilize that podcast feed to be the prime feed and to bring on potential new shows, then why not give their biggest shows their own feeds to do whatever they want? Hopefully it's utilized for more than just those weekly shows. I would love to see some additional content over there. You know, I would love to see, I mean, whoever, like maybe just a sit down with Ash Crossan or something for an hour or whatever the case is, on Jedi Council's podcast feed.
He's actually not the third lead now that I think about it. He's just the third good guy, because I totally left out Ezra Miller and Colin Farrell and all those people. So he's further down on the list. So there's that to look forward to. Just some random things I'll toss out and you can comment on them. Jenna Bush was another standout on Movie Talk. I'm really enjoying her presence. She was on today. Something I realized, anytime that they discuss Black Panther, and you guys know the new visual aesthetic for Movie Talk, they have clips playing as our pundits are talking. Every time they discuss Black Panther, they roll the climax of the film. So I didn't know. It took me forever to catch on to that, but finally I was just watching this week and I'm like, why are they playing the ending of the movie? I know we're now talking about the highest grossing superhero movie of all time, but this also wasn't the first time that they've done this. I realized that they've been doing it for a while. Where did they get that footage? It's in high definition. I don't know. There were so many questions that came out of that. Did you even catch that at all?
I caught it a while ago, actually. I think I caught it last week when they were talking about it. Yeah, it's no surprise. You know, Chris Stuckman's out there doing his review and spoiling the movie. He spoiled the movie for me. So he literally told me where the final and big fight scene took place and told me how dimly lit it was. It's a little annoying if you ask me. Anyway, or you could just watch it on Movie Talk. No, I'm joking. I'm just throwing some shade. The only thing that I have to contribute to this portion of the conversation, if we're talking about the graphics and this and that, I don't know if it's always been there, but I definitely noticed it for the first time. These little pop-in graphics that are promoting like Heroes today or Jedi Council today. I don't know if that's always been there since they introduced these new graphics or not, but it was definitely nice to sort of see that implementation in the graphics.
I noticed that Boost Mobile is still sticking around. They're endorsing particular videos. It's funny because like a month ago when they first brought Boost Mobile on and they started that flip the script segment, I went on and on about how that segment sucks and blah, 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 blah. And someone tweeted out at me and says, Snelling, you know that's part of the campaign that Boost Mobile is running. So no one bothered to correct me, well, except this person, that's not something that they necessarily wanted to introduce into Movie Talk, because our conversation was, I don't know if they should continue this segment. I don't know if I like it, but it was purely because it was part of the Boost campaign to flip the script or whatever. So late on that. Thanks for correcting us in a timely manner. Jesus Christ. Let's just skip the Spielberg thing. It's a crime that Munich is an honorable mention, and Catch Me If You Can, which is just a middle of the road Spielberg, is still better than 95% of the movies that are ever made. But Catch Me If You Can is middle of the road Spielberg. Munich is better. That's a crime. But anyway,
you mean mediocre?
It's a fun list, and hopefully 20,000 views is their goal, because I think every video will confidently get there. Anyway, the last question that I have for you, I brought this up to you off air earlier in the week. I'm frustrated because I don't feel like everyone audience included and pundits included, I don't think everyone is on the same page when it comes to this Disney Fox deal. And so you and I have talked a little bit about what's a matter of fact versus speculation on Collider. And is Collider a channel that's supposed to be about the news, or is it supposed to be about speculation and just conjuring up fun things to talk about, right? And there's got to be a balance, because when people rely on the news, they might take the speculation as fact. And so the example we always go to is Schnepp saying Moon Knight is in The Punisher when that just didn't happen.
Falling into the Schnepp zone.
Right. So I don't think everyone is on the same page with the Disney Fox deal, because any time a Fox property is brought up, these guys immediately come up with, oh, maybe they're saving it for the Disney streaming service. Why? I thought it's been made very clear that Disney, we don't even know if Disney is the buyer. And even if they are, we still have a year before that stuff can be sorted out and it actually becomes a thing. Kevin Feige just came out and said, we are so far away from an X-Men Avengers crossover, he's not even thinking about it. Like, he might come up with an idea if this is the case, but Marvel Studios is not greenlighting that movie. So it annoys me when they act like this is such a thing and they're constantly talking about, well, maybe this is for the streaming service, when nobody knows what the streaming service is and nobody has any idea if something like New Mutants is being saved for that. Like, all of that just feels so like out of your ass, out of thin air, that I don't know. I think they're confusing viewers. Because again, like I said, as far as we know, it is business as usual at Disney. It is business as usual at Fox. So just because Donald Glover in the Deadpool animated series is out, it doesn't mean Disney doesn't want to greenlight an R-rated cartoon because it's not their property. Like, I just don't get it. Are we on the same page? Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, I think it's okay to have aimless and wild fan speculation and fan discussion. I mean, but you have to give sort of a preemptive warning to people, like, hey, I have no basis of what I'm about to say, but wouldn't it be cool if da-da-da, or I mean, we've had conversations like that, like, oh, maybe this, maybe that, da-da-da. Like, I think it happened on Movie Talk yesterday. Kristian actually said, like, I have nothing to back this up, what I'm about to say. And he sort of just said what he was going to say, and I was fine with it. I took it with a grain of salt. There are people in this on this channel who I look at as a news source, and it's Frosty, right? I mean, he's the guy that gives us good information, good scoops, and this and that. He broke the stuff about the Deadpool. I mean, he didn't necessarily break the information in the news about the Deadpool stuff, but he came on to a news segment, pretty much set the table for everything that was going on, put everybody's minds at ease. And I think that's really what it needs to be. It's like, this is the news guy. These guys are just fans sort of talking about this stuff. As long as they give like a precursor to what they're saying, I don't really have that much of a problem with it. But you are right. I think sometimes it can run wild a little bit. I go back to the whole Ben Affleck doesn't want to be Batman thing that happened with John Campea back then, and how all that was handled. I wasn't a huge fan of it. But yeah, it's okay to talk as fans. I mean,
it just depends on the avenue. Like, but sometimes they talk about this stuff and it feels like something that you would just come up with for a fun mailbag question. Like something that someone comes up with that's just fun to talk about. And I'm not saying I don't have a problem with that discussion, but when they're on Collider Movie Talk specifically, and it feels like some of the pundits are speaking, sometimes it just feels like they're not on the same page. Like some people.
Well, we've talked before about how do we view Movie Talk? Do we view it as a news show, or do we view it as a discussion show? And I think that's sort of the conversation that needs to be had about what it exactly is. And because it seems to me, at least when I watch it, I'm getting news because I don't know the things that they're about to tell me, because I don't follow along with it as closely as you do or other people might do. So it is breaking news to me, but I know that the show is about discussing the topics. But yes, you're right. People can get confused when things go a little bit wacky like that. I've always been critical of news outlets who basically speculate with the basis of news just for content. Does that make sense? So
Sure.
It's just like, oh, such and such, if I'm relating it to music, such and such is sitting in the studio. They might be recording an album. It's like, yeah, they might be recording an album. Great fucking job at reporting. You've done fantastic. Now let's talk about it for an hour. How about not? How about just relax, okay? Like, I mean, you could go in a million different directions. Like, maybe they're writing a song with this person, or maybe they're, I don't know. But yeah, sometimes it gets a little silly.
Another quick example that we talked about, we brought it up a couple of weeks ago. I don't think we talked about it on air. There was that one video, I don't remember where it was, where Roka just throws out of nowhere that he just snuck in rumors that Kevin Feige was going to replace Kathleen Kennedy. And you and I were like,
that. I was like, has that even been discussed at all?
You and I were like, what? What are you talking about? Like, for one, we had never heard that at all. Two, again, like I said, it just felt like a mailbag question that he just came up with, like a fun mailbag question. Like I could
like a mailbag question you would ignore.
Well, I mean,
no,
that's a fun thing.
That's not gonna happen.
Like that's a fun thing to talk about. Like if someone wrote in, "Hey, can you imagine what Star Wars or Lucasfilm would be like under Kevin Feige?" That's what it felt like to me, and I was like, "Where did that come from?" And not only did it feel random, but he didn't spend any time elaborating or evaluating that massive idea. I was like, what in the world?
Well, and
how are you just going to drop that and not do anything with it?
To be fair, like, listen, yeah, sometimes I've done this when I've been on camera and doing YouTube stuff. Like, sometimes you just say things and it's not necessarily how you meant it. It very well could have been, he could have said, people are talking about or wanting Kevin Feige to do this, but even at that, like, it's not even really relevant. Listen, I think to sort of jump on this whole thing that we're talking about, I found it fascinating to see how Collider handled this Donald Glover Deadpool situation this week, specifically because one, it's television, and they just don't do as much with television. Obviously I get why they did it. Donald Glover, huge in the movie space, also Deadpool being with Marvel and all this other stuff, or Fox or whatever. But this is what Donald Glover did this week is so outside and against the grain of the way that things are handled in this space. Mm-hmm. I really, really, really was interested to see how people reacted, and the shock of the only people I really saw talking about it, I'm sure they talked about it on Heroes, but I saw Roka talking about it, and the shock that he had going through some of this discussion was fascinating, where Dorian seemed to have been like, yeah, this really doesn't surprise me. That's sort of what my take on it was. I mean, you and I have our ear to the ground on everything Donald Glover. He's my man crush. And when that happened, I pretty much was like, yeah, that sounds about right. What was your takeaway from watching some of this breakdown?
I don't know. I mean, it was obviously a badass move, and I loved it because you and I are such big fans of Donald Glover, and I think you and I, well, I don't know if I can speak to this for you always, but
well, we're going to talk about it on Sight and Sound Weekly this week, I'm sure,
yeah.
But just their reaction to it.
You kind of said everything that I could have said already. I mean, it was funny that Roka was so surprised about it, but you and I have joked a lot that people in that studio don't always know who Donald Glover is. So
it just not only not who he is, but also what his track record sort of holds. Yeah, I think if you look at the big picture of Donald Glover throughout his entire career, then yeah, something like that shouldn't surprise people. But it was just so interesting. It was such a punk rock move. It was such a fuck you to everything that the way things are supposed to be done, like with people not supposed to be saying what their review is for things because there's
embargoes
and like contracts being signed and Collider's down the road from Warner Brothers, and so we're hearing whispers of that. It's just like he was just like, no,
well,
I'm not doing this.
I think, and I don't know, there might be people in that studio who disagree with me, but I think like that, if there's ever going to be one, that is a story for the fans, because I think that's something that all of us can get on board with. Like I said, it's a dope move. We get to see a script, and it's exactly how the Deadpool movie in general was handled. So I guess I'm shocked, and I don't know if Roka disagreed with it or anything like that, but I guess I was too busy cheerleading the movement that I wasn't really that shocked. You know what I mean? So
yeah, you weren't getting meta with like how people were going to handle
it.
Did they mention it on Heroes at all?
I don't think I finished the episode actually where they talked about it.
Okay.
To be honest.
I'm going to go back and watch it then.
But anyway, I don't know.
What do you think Schnepp would have said? I feel like he would have loved it.
I really wish. You know what? I don't know. It was like 4 a.m. when I watched Heroes. I don't know if I got through that part or not. But yeah. Anyway.
Let's talk about Harloff and Ellis. Oh wait, no, never mind.
No. Let's go on and finish up. I think the last thing I want to talk about is and again, we've only seen Tuesday's Schmoedown. The JTE versus Roka will come out after Schmoe has already come out. So everything that Jay and I will talk about only applies to the Real Rejects versus the Wildberries. But there's still just a ton to say, because this was the first glimpse into the live Schmoedown. I admitted a couple weeks ago that I guess I wasn't quite sure what it was, the potential of this, until I saw a lot of the behind-the-scenes footage that was released when they filmed this thing. So I was really excited. Based on that, I was really, really excited to get into it this week. And there are just so many bullet points that I want to talk about. I'll just give you my overall take, and then I want to hear what you have. But like I said, the potential of this thing, I didn't realize that they sold merchandise. They had the meet and greet. I mean, it just felt like such a big thing to me for the fans and for Collider in general. But I absolutely felt how crazy it was to the Collider team as well. Makuga, Dewberry, Real Rejects, Kristian and Mark. I could see it on their faces that they felt. They were excited. They were pumped. It was, even for them, it was bigger and better than they had originally imagined. And I thought it was all over their face. And I was just all smiles, all grins the entire time, thinking about the actual match versus, how this must feel to the crew to actually do this and then to put it out. I mean, it just, there is so much to dissect now that this is a reality. How did you take all of this in?
Well, I found it fascinating to watch simply because everybody that was on the stage, whether it was Mark and Kristian or the competitors themselves, or even Sam Levine, who came up for a little bit of an interview. First of all, when I saw the runtime of it, I was like, oh, interesting. Because, sometimes with the runtime of the Schmoedown, you never really know what you're going to get. It's longer and this and that.
Right.
They made a full production out of it. And that's as they should. What I mean is they made a full production out of this video, which I appreciate. It felt like I was watching an event, and that's how it should feel. And you're right. They were feeding off of the energy of the crowd. And one of my favorite things, oh my fucking God.
Yes.
Last week on Harloff and Ellis, when Mark was making fun of how hot Kristian came out of the gates, I thought it was hilarious. And then I had forgotten about it. And then when he did it, and he was like, what the fuck is up? I was just like, oh my God. It was so funny to me. Like, I think I was sitting at work watching it, and I just had like tears in my eyes because it was so funny. What the fuck is like? It just was so ridiculous. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I love it. I think it's great, but just the interpretation of it was so funny.
It was great.
Yeah. So
it was. I mean, everybody. I think, like I said though, everybody felt that way.
Well,
like,
listen, real quick. Here, this is as much as I can really throw out there, and then I can ride off of whatever you're saying. But, I found it fascinating and interesting. And this is something I want people to pay attention to if they haven't noticed it on the next one that they see. Is that there was this really fine line between performing for the crowd and entertaining the crowd, because that throws in, I don't want people to sleep on the fact or take it for granted just how different it is to do something, us do this podcast and then you throw a room of people. It's not going to be the same. It's never, ever going to be the same, for better or for worse. There's this fine line of being the entertainer that they're doing, and then when they're actually competing, flipping that and just watching a Schmoedown like we're always watching it, right? I mean, that's how it felt to me, that they were just in it, right? But then they would just on cue almost, they would see a little bit of an opening to go to the crowd or entertain the crowd, and I just found it fascinating to see that line be walked on and be danced upon. I
see what you're saying, but It felt like everything was sort of new to me. You know what I mean? Like, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You sort of have to adapt. Hey, here's this thing that we do all the time, but adapt it for a live audience. So they do a lot of, but all of it felt new, because I never even considered. I didn't realize how they were going to tackle the issue of like the pre-roll interviews with all of the contestants, and like, so what they came up with was certainly unique, and I'll even give credit to the players, the contestants, like the Real Rejects doing that rap and doing it well. Like I said, they brought their A game, and you could feel their excitement. And even though the Wildberries didn't come prepared, they were just equally just funny as hell. Everybody was funny as hell. And the only reason why I want to say that, I want to make sure that I say that, is because Josh McCouga, like, half of his humor is just cringe-worthy humor that you only laugh at because it's terrible, but it's not actually making you laugh because it's funny. McCouga was fucking funny during this match. Everybody was funny. I didn't really imagine Mark and Ellis coming out and entertaining the crowd in the way that they did. I don't know if I thought they were just going to automatically be seated the whole time and just start the whole thing, but all of that I hadn't considered. So it just felt really new. The people bringing their signs, all of that was great. I don't know. It just kind of shattered expectations, and yeah, I'm a little late to the party, but
Mark and Kristian on that stage together was sort of a sight to behold. That's something we don't see a lot, right? I mean, just their natural chemistry, how they played off of each other, was so nice, and that's something that you don't get all the time from people. I mean, that is down to the fact that they've literally worked together for all of these years, and that they know how to play off of each other, even though they don't do it on a stage that often. It made me hungry for more stuff like that, like more, I don't know, live Mark and Kristian together sort of thing.
Yeah. I hope they're not joking about coming to Kentucky, because they brought that up on Movie Talk. Like I said, we talked about it. We could fill those seats, man.
Did they joke about that?
You didn't? Did you watch Movie Talk or not?
Which one? I heard where they talked about, where they referenced us with Kentucky. I didn't hear anything. It was that same where episode. They said we're coming to Kentucky.
They made a joke that they're coming to Kentucky in that episode. But anyway.
Well, I could sell it out,
yes.
But listen, you guys got to give me a heads up. And knowing Kristian, he'd probably call me in the middle of work and be like,
"Hey, you coming tomorrow?"
I'm outside right. I'm outside right now. Where are we doing this?
The Schmoedown. We're in town. What?
Yeah, I need at least 2 to 3 months preparation.
I want to know what all of the El Portal theater employees thought of all this, because They were standing on the sidelines. I would have loved for Jen Sturger to have interviewed one of their employees. I think that would have been amazing. I don't know. My favorite part was when Makuga asked the crowd where they were when TV Talk was on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Makuga was sort of the unsung hero of the whole thing. I'd kind of forgotten what he looked like. It's been a while.
Well, he showed up on the Spielberg thing today, and my first thought was, why is he here?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Do you think they'll offer him a TV Talk podcast?
Yeah. I think they would. Yeah. Do you think they'll let us recap television?
I hope they reformat it. Please, God. Please reformat it.
They need to reformat
Listen, I'm just going to forewarn you. If it comes back the exact same as it was, I will rip into it.
Yeah. It's
got to change. It has got to change. I'm just warning you.
Yeah. No, we've talked about it plenty.
I'm not gonna rip into it, but you know.
Well, I will. You can do that thing where you you say something out loud because you actually secretly want me to bring it up. The social assassin Snell, if you will. We can play that game if you want. I'm gonna naturally pitch all the things that we've pitched the companies over the years for TV podcasts. So.
I could easily see Kristian being like, Josh, listen, I know you've got TV Talk back and that's great, and I know you don't listen to After Schmoe, but you should really listen to them because they've got some great ideas on how they can improve the show.
He not only would he just totally resent it, he wouldn't listen to the show, but in the off chance that he did, I think I would make it a point to just go nuts on TV Talk, just in case Makuga is listening, because ultimately we do want Collider to have a TV presence, and Makuga knows his stuff when it comes to TV, but
yes.
But formatting and the structure of that show is the biggest issue. It's too much, but that's the advantage that you have with a podcast network as well, because the superhero rundown that fit into every episode of TV Talk could just be its own podcast. I mean, it's that simple. So once you start dissecting the pieces that make up TV Talk, you could just have other podcasts that do it. But anyway, I don't want to give away all my ideas. I think that's all I have, really. I think the match spoiled the winner, because it's either that the match spoiled the winner throughout the entire thing, or Jen Sturger was wrong. But during the match, the Real Rejects record was 1-4, and then after they lost to the Wildberries, Jen Sturger in their post-interview brought up that they were 1-4 after the loss. So it's either she was wrong and meant to say 1-5, or the score had ruined it. So I'm curious to see if anybody's picked up on that. I haven't looked. Maybe I should have before we hit record, but that's okay. I think that's all I got, man.
Yeah, that's all I've got, too. I can't wait to watch Harloff and Ellis.
Yeah.
I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
I wonder if they care. I wonder if they care that we can't talk about their show.
They don't. And to be honest, we don't need to.
How dare you?
We don't.
How dare you? What if maybe they can break some news on Harloff and Ellis.
I think we're at a point.
Watch them break some huge news, and we'll be like, "Damn it!"
We're at a point where we haven't really consistently done Harloff and Ellis on this show at all, and when we do it, there's so little content out of it because it's just them talking. There's only so much you can do with it, and that's how I felt about particular moments of the live show. It's not anything new that I bring it up here. I think we've gotten to the point though where they know that we think that. So if they were to break any news, Ellis would have to give us a heads up, right?
He doesn't have to do anything.
That's true. That was my senior yearbook quote. Did you just throw my own quote at me?
Ryan Snelling, not very quotable.
Where can the people find you?
I was going to ask you, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at WhatUpSnell, I posted a commentary for The Last Jedi on the Sight and Sound podcast feed and YouTube channel, and I had this entire Force Ghost rant. Totally forgot that Anakin was a Force Ghost in Return of the Jedi. But anyway, you can watch the movie with me and take in everything else that I said in that 2.5 hours. Just ignore the fact that I'm going on and on about Anakin not having the ability to be a Force Ghost. And that's it. Jaye Williams.
You can find me online on social media at Jaye Williams, J to the A to the Y to the E. Twitter and Instagram, it's the same for both. Every single Friday, I'm breaking down everything music, that music show that people want. I'm talking about new releases, I'm talking about news. And don't miss Sight and Sound Weekly, which pops up on the SK feed every single Monday. We have, I'm convinced we're going to do like a 5-hour episode this week because there's so much news to go through. Television, movies, and music. We're breaking it all down just the way that we know how to do it, which is usually not very good, but it'll be entertaining. We think. That's all I've got. Goodbye.